G'day everyone, welcome to another episode of Insights with Tris and Belle. I'm Tris and this
We're
is Belle.
back.
How you
Hey
doing?
guys, how are you? I'm good. I got my nails done, half price. Very
Oh,
nice.
fancy. We had a
Yeah,
conversation about this the other day. So you just
we
asked
did.
half price. Is that the
I do. I just go in and I'm like, well, no one's going to charge me for full price, are they? Although one time they did try and I was like, no.
they didn't do the
Um,
full job? I think that's completely
yeah,
fair.
exactly. Half the time, half the equipment, half price.
There you go. I love it. I have not done my nails, I'm afraid to say. I do need to go to the barber. So I apologize
Yeah.
for my I don't know what the descriptor is. Rugged? I don't know.
Rugged, luscious beard, the
Yeah,
whole thing.
we go with that. We go with that. But look, to our viewers, we want to put a warning out before we continue this discussion because we will be talking about assault and sexual harassment of people with disabilities. So we just want a fair warning
Mhm.
and put that up front straight away. So we did, however, think that this was an incredibly important conversation to have,
Yes.
prompted in part by partly the allegations that Liberal Party junior staffer Brittany Higgins has
Mm.
raised recently, as well as the case of Anne-Marie Smith in South Australia. Uh,
Yes.
Also, the poignant protests that we've seen across
Mm.
the nation recently. So, yeah, it
Yeah.
can be a very, I suppose, heavy conversation, but one that's very important to have all the same.
Yeah. It's certainly been a topic of discussion in my friendship groups and family and that sort of thing. And I think that quite often the area of sexual assault or harassment of people with disabilities is left out of these conversations. So that's why I thought it would be super important for us to discuss today as well.
Absolutely. And just on that, I mean, we went researching some
Hmm.
figures around this, and I think we both said that it's unsurprising, but it's still incredibly harrowing. For instance,
Yeah,
50%
totally.
of people with disabilities after the age of 15 have been assaulted. More
Yep.
than one third of cases of sexual harassment are people with disabilities. And then if we look
Yes.
at the average of people with disabilities being assaulted, it's far above the average comparable to
Mm.
able-bodied people. So
Yeah,
these
for
are
both men and women, which is quite important to note, I think, as
absolutely
well.
very much so, very much so. So yeah,
Mm.
these are shocking statistics, but it goes to show that there is a culture out there that we need to look at fixing, that we need to put a lot more
Definitely.
attention towards, because if we remain silent, it's going to continue.
Yeah, and hard conversations are often the best ones to have, and that's why this is so important. And without these hard conversations, there can't be progress in issues like this. We have avoided them for too long as a society, and I think that we're seeing a movement now that is no longer putting up with that silence surrounding it, which is very great and important.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of some of the reasons why these figures are higher, why do we think this is? Why do we think that we're overrepresented within this space?
Well, I think it's certainly an area of intersectional discrimination as well as a few other things. That was a term only fairly recently coined. I believe it was in the 90s by um, an academic who coined the term at the time, talking about the experience of African American women, and it works in this context as well, particularly in the context of women who are women with disabilities who are facing multiple forms of discrimination. One, as a woman, in which you're already more vulnerable to sexual assault and harassment, and then two, as a person with a disability, which again increases the likelihood of being assaulted. And I think that the narrative that our society creates around disability kind of contributes to this in many ways. Tris and I have discussed in previous episodes about the narrative of weakness or deservingness of pity that is created around people with disabilities. And with that image, you don't have to view someone with a disability on the same level as other people. And then I think it's probably easier to excuse terrible behavior and crimes towards that group when you are not considering them in the same light or dignity as you do other
Hmm.
people. And I think, yeah, so I am a survivor of sexual assault myself. And I know that as a woman with a disability, that has felt particularly difficult to navigate. Not particularly difficult, I should say. Everyone's experiences are equally
Hmm.
valid and comparisons are odious in this context, but when I was a 19-year-old, that was my experience. I was just on a night out with friends in a context that I felt was quite safe, and ended up being drugged and assaulted. And it's something that's stuck with me since and has made me particularly passionate to talk about this issue. And I think that for me, in the healing process, which I'm still very much in the middle of, from that, and I don't know at what point, if healing is ever achieved from something like this, or if, you know, people with trauma kind of learn to live with that trauma and it contributes to who they are as an individual and the empathy that they have for the world around them. But I know that I have felt particular vulnerability and concern, because, you know, I feel that I appear physically weaker to people. And for me, that has been something that I felt frightened by. I'm like, am I a particular target for this sort of thing to happen? Is this going to happen to me again? And as I've said, the narrative that our society creates does say that people with disabilities are weaker. So that fear for me is not, you know, founded in nothing. It comes from somewhere. And I think that it's particularly important to address. And I know particularly, you know, in the context of cognitive disability as well, that overrepresentation is much higher than in the physically disabled community, and that must be acknowledged. And we need to figure out ways of dealing with this problem for what it is. If we just look at, you know, women facing harassment or disabled people facing harassment without the specific context of disabled women facing harassment, we're not actually going to be able to accurately deal with the problem, because it's a very specific sort of discrimination that we're facing. And that's why I think it's so important to address it. And yeah, so in terms of my experience, I just hope that sharing it is kind of in some way, you know, brings an area, an aura of, like, it makes it more personal to people, because I think that if you hear of this, it's kind of the silent epidemic and we don't hear about it. But I know that from speaking to friends, it's been able to educate them about the issue. And I think hopefully that that discussing this today with Tris will do that same thing. And just remembering that it's the human being at the center of this. And, you know, you don't need to have a wife or a mother or a daughter to remember these things. You need to see the human being, and for their dignity, regardless of their relation to you in your life. Women aren't side characters in men's life. We are our own people, and deserve to be respected and treated as such. And I think violation in the context of assault is so dehumanizing, and that's something that we have allowed to continue. And whether that be through a joke that's made casually or through the actual act of assault, it's neither are acceptable, and both of those contribute to this. People tend to, you know, undermine the importance of things like jokes, but that's creating the culture in which women, one, are assaulted, two, feel like they can't speak out about assault, and three, have their experiences undermined. So we need to deal with this in a light of extreme seriousness, because it is an extremely serious issue. And yeah, hopefully that in just having these sorts of conversations, we can remind people of the human being behind these things, that needs to be addressed and dealt with.
Yeah, what you were saying there remind me of the speech a high school student recently gave, you know, asking his friends to call each other out when they're making jokes, because so often that just entrenches stereotypes, and it plays a very damaging game that we need to call out now. I mean, I was recently in a completely different context. You know, everyone's experiences are unique. With a different context, I recently heard someone use the R word, and you know, these are things that people say in jest, but they need to stop and think that, you know, this actually has meaning. And can lead to more damaging consequences down the track if we don't call it out. But one of the other things I wanted to discuss with you, Belle, was around ensuring that there's a safe and respectful way for people to share their narratives and stories and to make complaints. You know, not everyone is going to be in a position that they are comfortable to do that, but wherever possible, we need to ensure that those avenues are in place, because that's so important to for individuals. And I know, for instance, that the NDIS Commission, for all registered providers, they have to report or notify the NDIS of all reportable incidents. There's complaints on that website, a complaints channel on that website as well, nds.gov.au. And it also goes to speak to the importance of advocacy and,
Totally.
we're all in this together. We're banding around one another. Although we can't fully appreciate what each other's going through, we're still here to support however we can, and that's really important to note too.
Yeah. And I think in the context of, coming forward with your story, if you are a survivor of assault, whether that be sexual or another sort, I think that it's important to remember that there's no right time. Whatever time for you feels right don't let anyone push you to something, or don't feel like you can't say it at any point. There will be avenues that you can do things discreetly if that's what you're looking for. And there's no right time. And there will be people to support you. If you feel that perhaps the environment around you is not supportive, there are external environments, centres for women, shelters for victims of domestic abuse and that sort of thing that are available. So there will be a safe person or a safe place. And just to remember that and feel supported in that, and that, within even the disabled community, I think we're a beautiful community that gets around each other, and just knowing that your story is yours and you own it, and when you feel comfortable to share, or if you don't, those are both two legitimate feelings. And yeah, just to take your own time and respect your needs and your mental health and those things when coming forward with those stories or not.
Yeah, that's a very powerful statement. We hope that viewers can feel part of our community and can get comfort in us sharing this dialogue today, because it's so important, as you said, Belle, that we do have this dialogue. But so powerfully said. That's a wrap for this episode, guys. One that's slightly more poignant and somber, but again, one that we thought was really worthwhile to have. But thanks so much again, Belle. Thanks for all your insights as always.
Thank you so much, Tris, and I'm sure we'll be back with the laughs next week.
Yeah, we'll save the laughs for next week. We'll be back.
Yeah.
All good.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.
See you, everyone. Bye.